pain has a sound. Most people don't know that, but Sonia Dave did. It wasn't a scream. Screams were too messy, too unprofessional for a woman in her position. No, the sound of pain was much quieter. It was the wet, tight crunch of duct tape being pulled over bruised skin in a bathroom stall at 6 a.m. It was the sharp, jagged intake of breath when you tried to zip a tailored dress over a ribcage that felt less like bone and more like shattered stained glass. And right now, as she stood outside the towering glass monolith of Bellux International, the sound of pain was the rhythmic click-clack of her 3-inch stilettos hitting the pavement. A rhythm that projected business as usual to the world, even while every nerve ending in her body screamed emergency room. 72 hours. That is exactly 4,320 minutes of suffocating on your own agony. It had been 3 days of wrapping her torso in ace bandages so tight they felt like a corset made of iron, restricting her lungs until every breath was a shallow, burning sip of air. 3 days of swallowing pharmacy-grade ibuprofen like they were breath mints, washing them down with lukewarm water and sheer willpower. 3 days of looking into the mirror, applying concealer to the dark circles under her eyes, and telling the woman staring back that she was not a victim. She was a strategist. And strategists didn't bleed, they planned. Most people assume the hardest part of being injured is the physical sensation, the throbbing ache, the sharp stabs. They're wrong. The hardest part is the acting. It is the Academy Award-winning performance you have to put on every time a colleague asks, "How are you?" It is the smile you plaster on your face when your side feels like it's being chewed on by a wolf. It is forcing your voice to remain steady and authoritative when your throat tastes like copper and bile. Sonia was an excellent actress. She had to be. As the lead strategic analyst for Bellux, she was a black woman swimming in a corporate shark tank dominated by men who thought diversity was just a French word for lowering the bar. She couldn't afford to be weak. She couldn't afford to be human. And she certainly couldn't afford to let anyone know that Robert Gentry, the senior logistics manager with the pedigree of a golden retriever and the soul of a laughing hyena, had cornered her in the parking structure on Monday night. He hadn't liked her rejection. That was the catalyst, the spark that lit the fuse. But the explosive reality was that he hadn't liked that she, a woman he considered beneath him in every social metric that mattered to his country club ego, had dared to audit his department. She had found the discrepancies in his shipping manifests. She had seen the numbers that didn't add up. And when she told him to back off or get audited, he snapped. The result was a violent, messy physical altercation in the shadows of the concrete garage that left Sonia with 2 cracked ribs, a kaleidoscopic bruise blooming across her left hip like a toxic flower, and a burning, cold hatred that was currently the only thing keeping her upright. But she wasn't hiding at home. She wasn't cowering in her apartment with the curtains drawn. She was hiding in plain sight because today was the quarterly review. Robert thought breaking her ribs would break her silence. He thought pain would make her obedient. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. Sonia Dave didn't just want to report Robert to HR, she wanted to bury him under a mountain of irrefutable data. She checked her reflection in the darkened glass of the revolving doors. Her contour was sharp enough to cut. Her oversized silk blouse was fashionable enough to be professional, yet loose enough to hide the bulk of the bandages beneath. She popped 2 more extra-strength painkillers dry, swallowing them with a grimace. She wasn't going into that boardroom to be a victim. She was walking into the lion's den, or rather, the dragon's lair. Kong Woo-jin. The name alone was enough to drop the ambient temperature of a room by 10 degrees. The CEO of Bellux. The dragon of the East Coast. The tabloids called him a reclusive billionaire genius, a man who turned data into gold. The streets whispered darker things, that Bellux was just a shiny laundry machine for money that came from places the IRS didn't dare look, and that Woo-jin was less of a businessman and more of a kingpin. Sonia didn't deal in rumors. She dealt in facts. And the fact was that Kong Woo-jin did not tolerate failure. He barely tolerated mediocrity. And he definitely wouldn't tolerate a broken analyst bleeding on his mahogany conference table. But she didn't know that the dragon was already watching. She didn't know that her carefully constructed mask was about to slip. And she certainly didn't know that falling apart in front of him would be the most dangerous, and perhaps the most rewarding, thing she ever did. Before we step into the boardroom that changed everything, do me a favor. Hit that like button and smash subscribe if you love a heroine who bites back. It helps the channel, and you won't want to miss what happens next. She moved through the revolving doors, her gait smooth, practiced. Every step sent a shockwave of agony up her spine, white-hot and jagged. She turned the pain into focus. Step. Breathe. Step. Breathe. The lobby was bustling, filled with suits and security details. She swiped her badge, the little green light beeping a cheerful permission to enter hell. "Morning, Miss Dave," the security guard, a nice older man named Earl, nodded at her. "You looking a little pale today. Everything all right?" Sonia flashed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just chasing deadlines, Earl. You know how the dragon gets if his numbers aren't ready. Ain't that the truth? You take care now." She made it to the elevator bank. She pressed the button for the 40th floor, praying for a solo ride. The universe, in its infinite sense of humor, denied her. A hand jammed between the closing doors, forcing them back open. Robert Gentry stepped inside. He looked infuriatingly fresh. Expensive gray suit, hair gelled to perfection, the smell of expensive cologne masking the scent of the predator beneath. He saw Sonia, and a slow, oily smile spread across his face. He reached out and pressed the button for the 40th floor, his knuckle lingering near the panel. "Sonia," he said, his voice smooth, lacking any of the rage he'd shown 3 nights ago. "You made it in. I'm surprised. I thought you might call in sick. You know, take a few days to recover." Sonia didn't look at him. She kept her eyes fixed on the digital numbers climbing the display. "I have a presentation to give, Robert. Unlike some people, I don't let personal issues affect my performance." He chuckled, a low sound that made her skin crawl. He stepped closer. Too close. Sonia didn't flinch, though every instinct screamed at her to defend herself. "That's the spirit. Resilience. I like that about you. But you look tired. Is your side bothering you? You should be careful, Sonia. Stress fractures can be nasty." "The only stress I'm under is the proximity to your cologne," Sonia shot back, her voice ice cold. "It smells like desperation and a midlife crisis." Robert's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. "You have a sharp tongue. Careful you don't bite it off. The quarterly review is a high-pressure environment. It would be a shame if you collapsed under the weight of it all." "I'm not the one who should be worried about collapsing, Robert," she said, finally turning to face him. Her dark eyes bored into his. "Gravity comes for everyone eventually. Even mediocrity in an expensive suit." The elevator chimed at the 40th floor. The doors slid open. Sonia stepped out before he could respond, leaving him standing there with his jaw slightly unclenched. She walked toward the boardroom, her heart hammering against her injured ribs like a trapped bird. That was close. Too close. Her adrenaline was spiking, and with it, the pain was sharpening from a dull roar to a piercing scream. Just get through the meeting. Present the data. Expose the shipping leaks. Then go to the hospital. The boardroom was already full. It was a massive space, dominated by a table long enough to land a plane on. The air was thick with tension. The CFO, the COO, the VPs of every division, they were all there, shuffling papers, checking tablets, looking nervous. And at the head of the table sat Kong Woo-jin. He was stillness personified. While everyone else fidgeted, Woo-jin sat in his high-backed leather chair like a king on a throne of skulls. He was younger than people expected, early 30s, with sharp, aristocratic Korean features and hair that fell in a dark, chaotic sweep over his forehead. He wore a black suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone to reveal the faint, jagged edge of a tattoo climbing up his neck. He wasn't looking at his tablet. He was looking out the window at the city below, looking bored. Sonia took her seat 3 spots down on the left. She set her laptop down with trembling hands, quickly hiding them under the table. Robert entered a moment later, breezing in and taking a seat opposite her. He winked. Actually winked. "Let's begin," Woo-jin said. His voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the room instantly. It was a baritone that vibrated in the floorboards. He turned his gaze from the window to the room, his eyes dark and unreadable. "I have a dinner reservation at 8. Do not waste my time." The meeting commenced. The CFO droned on about quarterly projections. The VP of marketing presented a flashy slideshow about brand synergy. Woo-jin didn't take notes. He just watched them, his face impassive, occasionally tapping a finger on the armrest. It was the tapping of a predator waiting for a gazelle to trip. Strategic operations, Wu Jin said, cutting off the VP of marketing mid-sentence. Ms. Dave, you're up. Sonia stood. It was a mistake. The moment she straightened her spine, a bolt of agony shot through her torso so intense that her vision went white for a second. She grabbed the edge of the table, her knuckles turning ash-gray. Breathe. Just breathe. She forced the black spots in her vision to recede. Thank you, Mr. Kong, she said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. She tapped her laptop, casting her charts onto the main screen. This quarter, strategic operations focused on supply chain efficiency. We identified a 14% bleed in the logistics sector. Across the table, Robert stiffened. 14%, Sonia continued, finding her rhythm. The pain was there, a hot knife twisting in her side, but the data was her shield. We tracked the discrepancies to the trans-Pacific shipping routes. Specifically, cargo containers that are logged as damaged and written off, but never actually appear in the waste disposal manifests. That's a clerical error, Robert interrupted, his voice loud. We've discussed this, Sonia. It's a software glitch in the legacy system. Wu Jin didn't look at Robert. He looked at Sonia. Continue. Sonia took a breath. A bad idea. Her ribs screamed. She felt a bead of cold sweat trickle down her spine. It is not a glitch. I manually cross-referenced the weight distribution logs. The containers aren't empty when they're written off. They're full. Someone is offloading high-value inventory before it hits the distribution centers. This is ridiculous. Robert slammed his hand on the table. Mr. Kong, I object to this ambush. Ms. Dave has been unwell lately. I believe she is misinterpreting data to cover for her department's lack of oversight. I have the logs, Sonia said, reaching for the clicker to change the slide. I can show you the signatures authorizing the write-offs. They belong to. The room spun. It wasn't a metaphor. The room literally tilted on its axis. The pain in her side suddenly spiked, a crescendo of agony that stole the breath from her lungs. She gasped, dropping the clicker. It clattered loudly on the floor. Ms. Dave. Wu Jin's voice. Closer now. Sonia tried to focus on him. He was blurring. Why was he blurring? I have the signatures. Her legs gave out. It was slow motion. She felt her knees buckle, the strength evaporating from her muscles. She reached for the table, but her hand slipped. She was falling, tumbling toward the hard, unforgiving carpet, ready to embrace the darkness. But she never hit the floor. Before we proceed, smash that subscribe button to know what happens next. Strong arms, smelling of sandalwood and something distinctly metallic, caught her midair. The impact jarred her ribs, and she let out a whimpering cry she couldn't suppress. She was hauled up, not roughly, but with a terrifying strength, until she was pressed against a solid chest. She blinked, trying to clear the fog. She was looking up into the eyes of Kong Wu Jin. Up close, he was devastating. And he looked furious. You're injured, he stated. It wasn't a question. His hand was on her back, right over the bandages, and he must have felt the stiffness, the heat radiating from the inflammation. I'm fine, Sonia slurred, her head lolling against his shoulder. Just skipped breakfast. Liar, Wu Jin growled. He looked up, sweeping the room with a gaze that could have stripped paint from the walls. Meeting adjourned. Everyone out. Now. Sir, we haven't finished the CFO started. Did I stutter? Wu Jin didn't raise his voice, but the menace in it was absolute. Get out. Robert, stay where you are. The room cleared in under 10 seconds. Executives scrambled over each other to escape the dragon's lair. The door clicked shut, leaving only Sonia, drooping in Wu Jin's arms, and a very pale Robert Gentry standing on the other side of the table. Wu Jin shifted Sonia, lifting her effortlessly into his arms like a bride. He carried her not to the door, but to the side of the room where a hidden panel in the wall slid open to reveal a private elevator. Minho, Wu Jin said into the air. A shadow detached itself from the corner of the room. Minho, Wu Jin's silent enforcer, stepped into the light. Take Mr. Gentry to the basement. Keep him comfortable. I have questions. Wait, Mr. Kong. Robert stammered, backing away. She's lying. She's crazy. You can't do this. I can do whatever I want, Wu Jin said, stepping into the private elevator with Sonia. I own the building. The doors closed, shutting out Robert's protests. The elevator shot upward, bypassing the executive floors and heading straight for the penthouse. Sonia drifted in and out of consciousness. She felt the elevator stop. She felt the change in air pressure. She heard the soft hum of automated doors. Then she was being lowered onto something impossibly soft. A bed. Silk sheets. Dr. Lee is 3 minutes out, a calm voice said. She doesn't have 3 minutes, Wu Jin's voice replied. Get the scissors. Sonia's eyes snapped open. Panic surged through the haze. No scissors. This shirt was expensive. Wu Jin loomed over her. He had shed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms covered in intricate ink, dragons coiling around tigers. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable, caught somewhere between concern and clinical assessment. You're worried about the blouse? He raised an eyebrow. You have internal bleeding, Miss Dave. I'll buy you a factory of silk shirts if you survive the next hour. Deal, she whispered. Get it in writing. He almost smiled. Almost. Then he cut the shirt open. He sucked in a sharp breath. Sonia couldn't see her own torso, but she knew what it looked like. The bandages were stained dark. The bruising had spread. It was a roadmap of violence painted on her skin. Who? Wu Jin asked. The word was simple, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. Sonia looked at him. She saw the rage simmering in his eyes, but it wasn't the chaotic, sloppy rage of Robert Gentry. It was cold, calculated. It was a weapon. And for the first time in 3 days, Sonia realized she didn't have to fight this alone. But she also knew that telling him the truth was dangerous. If she told him, she wasn't just an employee anymore. She was an accomplice. She was entering his world. Before I tell you, Sonia rasped, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. I need to know something. Wu Jin paused, his hand hovering over her ribs. What? Are you the CEO? She asked, her eyes locking onto his. Or are you the dragon? Wu Jin stared at her. The air in the room grew heavy. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. For you? I'm the one who catches you when you fall. For the man who did this? I am the nightmare he wakes up screaming from. Good, Sonia whispered, her grip on his wrist loosening as the darkness finally claimed her. Because I have a flash drive in my pocket. It proves Robert Gentry is selling your routes to the Triad. The silence in the penthouse was absolute. Wu Jin froze. He looked at the unconscious woman in his bed, battered, broken, and defiant to the very end. He reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, silver USB drive. He turned it over in his fingers. This wasn't just a harassment case. This was an act of war. And Robert Gentry was the first casualty. When Sonia woke up, the world was soft. The pain was still there, but it was distant, muffled by heavy painkillers. She blinked, adjusting to the low light. She was in a room that was larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a panoramic view of New York City at night, glittering like a jewelry box. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. A groan escaped her lips. Don't, a voice commanded from the shadows. Sonia turned her head. Wu Jin was sitting in a leather armchair in the corner, reading a book under a pool of yellow light. He closed it and stood up, walking toward the bed. He looked different. Softer, somehow, without the armor of his suit jacket. But the tattoos on his arms were a stark reminder of who he was. Dr. Lee patched you up, Wu Jin said, pouring a glass of water from a crystal carafe on the nightstand. He held it to her lips, supporting her head with a hand that was surprisingly gentle. 2 fractured ribs, severe contusions, dehydration, and exhaustion. You're lucky the rib didn't puncture a lung. Sonia drank greedily, the cool water soothing her throat. I've had worse Tuesdays. I doubt that. He set the glass down. We need to talk about the flash drive. Sonia tensed. Did you check it? I did. Wu Jin's face darkened. You were right. Gentry has been rerouting high-tech shipments to a shell company in Macau. He's been doing it for 6 months. He's been stealing from me. And harassing your staff, Sonia added pointedly. Don't forget that part. I haven't. Wu Jin pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped. Here is what I don't understand, Sonia. You had this evidence. You could have gone to the police. You could have gone to the FBI. You could have anonymously mailed it to me. Instead, you walked into a boardroom with broken ribs to present it to my face. Why? This was the moment. The twist. Sonia knew that whatever she said next would determine whether she left this penthouse as a guest or a prisoner. She struggled to prop herself up on her elbows, wincing. Because I didn't just find the theft, Wu Jin. I found the buyer. Wu Jin's eyes narrowed. I know who the buyer is. The Triad. No, Sonia said, a grim smile touching her lips. That's what Robert thought. He thought he was selling to the Triad. But I traced the IP addresses of the shell company. I dug into the encrypted comms he was using. He wasn't selling to the Triad. She paused for effect. He was selling to your uncle. Wu Jin went absolute still. The air left the room. His uncle, Kang Dae-young, was the former head of the family, the man Wu Jin had ousted to take control. A man who was supposed to be retired in Seoul. My uncle, Wu Jin repeated, his voice barely a whisper. That's impossible. It's in the data, Sonia said. Gentry was the inside man for a coup. The plan wasn't just to steal cargo. It was to bankrupt the logistics division, tank the stock price, and give your uncle the leverage to call for a vote of no confidence. Robert Gentry wasn't just a thief. He was the assassin sent to kill your career. Wu Jin stood up slowly. He walked to the window, staring out at the city he ruled. His reflection in the glass was ghostly. Sonia watched him, her heart pounding. She had just handed him the key to his own survival. You saved my empire, he said quietly, not turning around. I saved my job, Sonia corrected. I like my benefits package. Wu Jin turned. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It transformed him from a statue into something devastatingly human. You are a dangerous woman, Sonia Dave. I try. You need rest, he said, walking back to the door. You stay here until you are fully healed. No arguments. And Robert? Sonia asked. Wu Jin paused in the doorway. The shadows seemed to lengthen around him. Robert is currently explaining his poor life choices to Minho. Don't worry about him. He won't be attending any more meetings. He turned off the main light, leaving her in the warm glow of the bedside lamp. Sleep, Sonia. Tomorrow, we go to war. Sonia sank back into the pillows. She was exhausted, battered, and in the bed of a crime lord. But for the first time in 3 days, she felt safe. She closed her eyes, the image of Wu Jin's dark, intense gaze burning behind her eyelids. She had exposed the traitor. She had revealed the uncle. But she had the distinct feeling that the real danger wasn't the coup. The real danger was how much she liked the way Kang Wu Jin looked at her. The morning sun hit the penthouse windows with the subtlety of a flashbang grenade. Sonia groaned, pulling the duvet over her head, trying to burrow back into the expensive darkness. But the smell was already there. It wasn't the antiseptic sting of a hospital or the stale air of her own apartment. It was sesame oil, garlic, and slow-simmered broth. Her stomach growled, a traitorous sound that echoed in the quiet room. Rise and shine, Miss Dave. Sonia peeked out from under the covers. Kang Wu Jin was leaning against the doorframe. The Dragon of Manhattan was wearing gray sweatpants and a fitted black t-shirt that hugged his chest in a way that should be illegal in at least 12 states. He was holding a steaming bowl on a tray. I'm holding you hostage, Sonia mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. I shouldn't be smelling gourmet cooking. I should be smelling fear and damp basements. My basement is currently occupied, Wu Jin said, walking over and setting the tray on her lap. And I don't serve fear for breakfast. I serve jeonbukjuk, abalone porridge. It's good for healing. Sonia struggled to sit up, her ribs giving a sharp reminder of their existence. Wu Jin was there instantly, his hand supporting her back, adjusting the pillows with an efficiency that bordered on military precision. You're very domestic for a crime lord, she noted, eyeing the porridge. It looked incredible. I'm a multifaceted individual. Eat. She took a spoonful. It was warm, savory, and comforting in a way that made her eyes sting. She hadn't realized how hungry she was, or how lonely she'd been. So, what's the status? Am I fired? Is Robert dead? Did the stock market crash? Wu Jin sat on the edge of the bed, watching her eat. You are promoted. Robert is handled. And the stock market is stable, largely because I froze trading on our logistics sector before the news leaked. Sonia paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. Define handled. He signed a confession, Wu Jin said calmly, admitting to the embezzlement, the corporate espionage, and the assault. He also voluntarily transferred his assets to a charity of my choosing. In exchange, I agreed not to release the video of him crying and begging for his life to the internet. And where is he now? On a plane to a very small town in Nebraska. He has no money, no references, and if he ever steps foot in New York again, Minho will know before his plane touches the tarmac. Wu Jin's eyes were cold, hard flint. He is erased, Sonia. He doesn't exist in our world anymore. It was a clean, bloodless execution of a man's soul. Sonia shivered, not from cold, but from the realization of just how much power the man sitting next to her held. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me for taking out the trash, Wu Jin said, his voice softening. I should have done it sooner. I let my guard down with my uncle. I didn't think he'd use a worm like Gentry to get to me. Family is complicated, Sonia said, scraping the bottom of the bowl. Family is a snake pit, Wu Jin corrected. Now, give me the bowl. Dr. Lee is coming to check your bandages, and then we have work to do. If my uncle is coming for the crown, I need my queen strategist. Sonia froze. Queen strategist? Wu Jin stood up, taking the tray. He didn't look back, but she could hear the smirk in his voice. It's a working title. Don't let it go to your head. The next week was a blur of painkillers, strategy meetings, and a growing, terrifying intimacy. Sonia moved into the guest suite officially, her meager belongings retrieved from her apartment by Minho. She turned the penthouse living room into a war room. The glass walls became white bars, covered in marker scribbles detailing supply chains, shareholder alliances, and financial choke points. Wu Jin and Sonia worked in a rhythm that felt like they'd been partners for decades. She was the shield, predicting the attacks, shoring up the defenses, analyzing the data. He was the sword, striking at competitors, rallying loyalists, putting the fear of God into the board members. But it was the quiet moments that were the most dangerous. It was Tuesday night, rain lashing against the glass. They were on the sofa, surrounded by laptops. Sonia was rubbing her temple, a headache building behind her eyes. Stop, Wu Jin said. He reached over and closed her laptop. I need to finish this risk assessment on the Macau accounts, she protested. The accounts aren't going anywhere. Your sanity is. He stood up and walked behind the sofa. Before she could ask what he was doing, his hands settled on her shoulders. His thumbs dug into the tight muscles of her neck. Sonia gasped, her head falling forward involuntarily. You carry too much tension, Wu Jin murmured, his voice a low rumble near her ear. Relax. I can't relax, she breathed, her eyes fluttering shut. I'm in the middle of a corporate coup. You're in my living room, he corrected. His fingers worked magic, finding knots she didn't know she had. And you're safe. Sonia turned her head slightly, looking up at him. He was looking down, his face unguarded. The intensity in his eyes wasn't about business. It was about her. The air between them grew thick, charged with static electricity. Wu Jin, she whispered. It was the first time she'd used his name without a title. His hands stilled on her shoulders. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. She could smell the coffee on his breath, feel the heat radiating from his chest. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was a gravitational pull. Sonia, he replied, his gaze dropping to her lips. Tell me to stop. I can't, she admitted. I'm terrible at giving orders. Good thing I'm excellent at taking what I want. He leaned in. Their lips were a breath apart. Sonia could feel the ghost of his kiss, the promise of it. Beep, beep, beep. A high-pitched alarm shattered the moment. Wu Jin pulled back instantly, the softness vanishing from his face, replaced by the dragon's mask. He looked at his phone. Perimeter breach, he said, his voice ice. Someone is hacking the firewall. Before we proceed, smash that subscribe button to know what happens next. The firewall? Sonia was already opening her laptop, the romantic haze evaporated by the shot of adrenaline. That's impossible. I encrypted the keys myself this morning. They're not coming through the front door, Wu Jin said, moving to his own terminal. They're coming through the legacy servers. The ones Gentry had access to. I locked Gentry out. Sonia typed furiously, lines of code scrolling across her eyes. Wait. This isn't Gentry's signature. This is older. What do you mean, older? The code structure, Sonia muttered, her fingers flying. It's using a backdoor that was installed years ago. It's hardwired into the mainframe. Wu Jin, whoever this is, they didn't just hack in. They've been inside the system since the building was built. Wu Jin went still. My father built this system. Well, someone else has the keys. Sonia hit a final keystroke. Got them. I isolated the intrusion. They were trying to access the personnel files. Specifically yours. My personnel file is boring, Wu Jin said, but he looked unsettled. Why risk a full frontal assault for a background check? They weren't looking for your resume, Sonia said, her face paling as she read the logs. They were looking for your medical records. Specifically, your blood type and genetic markers. Wu Jin frowned. Why? Paternity, Sonia whispered. They're trying to prove, or disprove, lineage. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. My uncle, Wu Jin said slowly. He's trying to prove I'm illegitimate. If I'm not my father's son, I lose the voting rights to the chairman's shares. I lose the company. It's a smart play, Sonia admitted, her mind racing. But it requires a sample. Data isn't enough. They need a biological sample to match it against. Wu Jin looked at his bandaged hand, a small cut from a broken glass earlier that day. They can't get a sample unless they get to me. Or unless they have someone on the inside who already has one, Sonia said. Her eyes widened. She looked at the trash can in the corner of the kitchen, where Dr. Lee had disposed of the gauze from her checkup earlier, where he had also dressed a small cut on Wu Jin's hand. Dr. Lee, they said in unison. He's been with the family for 30 years, Wu Jin said, denial warring with logic in his tone. He delivered me. Which means he knows exactly how to destroy you, Sonia said, grabbing her coat. We need to get to his clinic. Now. If he still has that sample, your uncle wins. You are not going anywhere, Wu Jin commanded. You're injured. I am the only one who knows how to scrub the digital footprint of that sample if he's already uploaded the sequence, Sonia argued, buttoning her coat with grim determination. I'm driving. You most certainly are not driving, Wu Jin said, grabbing his keys. Minho. Car. Now. The ride to Dr. Lee's private clinic in Queens was a blur of neon lights and wet asphalt. Minho drove like a man who considered traffic laws to be mere suggestions. Wu Jin spent the ride on the phone, barking orders to lock down the penthouse, while Sonia worked on her tablet, building a digital cage to trap whatever data Dr. Lee might try to send. He's not answering, Wu Jin said, slamming his phone down. If he betrayed me. He might not have had a choice, Sonia said softly. Everyone has a leverage point, Wu Jin. Even loyal men. They screeched to a halt in front of the clinic. It was dark. The closed sign was flipped in the window. The front door was unlocked. Wu Jin drew a gun from a holster beneath his jacket. Sonia blinked. She hadn't even noticed he was carrying. Stay behind me, he ordered. Gladly. They entered the clinic. It was quiet, smelling of rubbing alcohol and old paper. The waiting room was empty. They moved down the hallway toward the private office in the back. A light was spilling out from under the door. Wu Jin kicked the door open, gun raised. Dr. Lee, step away from the... He stopped. Dr. Lee was sitting at his desk. But he wasn't typing. He wasn't uploading data. He was slumped forward, his head resting on the blotter. A neatly poured cup of tea sat next to him, steam still rising. And in his hand, loosely gripped, was a syringe. He's dead, Wu Jin said, lowering the gun. He moved to check the pulse, but it was a formality. The smell of bitter almonds hung in the air. Cyanide. He didn't send the data, Sonia said, rushing to the computer. The screen was blank. The hard drive had been physically drilled through. He destroyed it. He destroyed the sample and the records. Why? Wu Jin looked down at the man who had been a father figure to him. If he was working for my uncle, why destroy the evidence? Sonia saw a letter on the desk, tucked under the tea saucer. It had a single character written on it in calligraphy, truth. Wu Jin, she said, her voice trembling. Read this. Wu Jin picked up the letter. He read it in silence. Sonia watched his face crumble. The Dragon of Manhattan, the man who terrified boardrooms and broke fingers without blinking, looked like a lost child. What does it say? She asked gently. It says. Wu Jin's voice broke. It says my uncle isn't the one blackmailing him. It says my uncle has been dead for 6 months. Sonia's breath hitched. What? Then who? The letters, the emails, the orders. They were all fakes, Wu Jin said, looking up, his eyes wild. Dr. Li was being blackmailed by someone else. Someone who used my uncle's name to scare him. Someone who wanted the DNA test, not to prove I'm illegitimate, but to prove I'm compatible. Compatible for what? For a transplant, Wu Jin whispered. Bone marrow. Who needs a transplant? Wu Jin dropped the letter. It fluttered to the floor like a dying bird. My mother. Sonia stared at him. Your mother died when you were 4. That's the company history. Everyone knows that. She didn't die, Wu Jin said, his voice hollow. She was exiled. My father sent her away because she tried to take the company from him. She's been in a private sanitarium in Switzerland for 30 years. And now she's dying. And she wants her son back. Not to love him, but to harvest him. The revelation hit Sonia like a physical blow. The enemy wasn't a greedy uncle. It was a ghost. A mother willing to cannibalize her own child to survive and reclaim her throne. The coup, Sonia realized aloud. It wasn't about money. It was about capture. They wanted to bankrupt you, isolate you, strip you of your security so they could snatch you. Robert Gentry was just a distraction, Wu Jin said, turning to look at the dark window. Dr. Li protected me. He chose suicide over giving her the sample. Suddenly, the lights in the clinic flickered and died. The darkness was absolute. Get down! Wu Jin roared. He tackled Sonia just as the front window shattered. Canisters hissed as they skittered across the floor. Smoke. Tear gas. They followed us, Wu Jin coughed, dragging Sonia behind the heavy oak desk. They knew Li would fail. They came to collect the sample personally. Shadows moved in the hallway. Laser sights cut through the smoke. These weren't corporate goons. These were professionals. Mercenaries. Minho. Wu Jin yelled into his comms. Status. Pinned down, outside. Minho's voice crackled, accompanied by the sound of automatic fire. For hostiles, heavy gear. Wu Jin looked at Sonia. His eyes were red from the gas, but burning with a fierce, terrifying resolve. He checked the magazine of his gun. Sonia, he said, gripping her shoulder. Listen to me closely. In the bottom drawer of this desk, there is a back exit key. Take it. Go. I am not leaving you, Sonia snapped, grabbing a heavy glass paperweight from the desk. I didn't survive Robert Gentry to die in a doctor's office in Queens. And I am certainly not letting your cannibal mother win. Wu Jin stared at her for a split second, and then he laughed. A short, sharp bark of amusement in the middle of hell. You really are the queen, he said. He kissed her. Hard. Desperate. A kiss that tasted of tear gas and destiny. Stay low. Aim for the knees. I aim for the spreadsheet, Sonia quipped, her heart hammering. But knees will do. The door to the office was kicked in. A figure in black tactical gear stepped through, rifle raised. Mr. Khan, a distorted voice said from behind a gas mask. Your mother sends her love. Wu Jin stood up, firing 2 shots. The figure dropped. Tell her, Wu Jin snarled, stepping over the body as 3 more figures filled the hallway. I'm an orphan. The firefight that followed was chaotic, loud, and brief. Wu Jin moved with a lethal grace Sonia had never seen, a dancer of death. But there were too many of them. Minho was cut off. They were trapped in the office. A grenade rolled into the room. It wasn't fragmentation. It was a flashbang. Boom. The world went white. A high-pitched ringing consumed everything. Sonia felt herself being lifted, dragged. She tried to fight, but her limbs were water. Secure the target, a voice said, distant and distorted. Leave the girl. She's collateral. No. Sonia tried to scream. Wu Jin. Her vision cleared just enough to see Wu Jin fighting 2 men, his gun empty, using his fists, his teeth. He was a monster. But then a 3rd man stepped up and jammed a needle into his neck. Wu Jin froze. He swayed. His eyes met Sonia's across the room. He mouthed one word before he crumpled to the floor. Run. The mercenaries grabbed Wu Jin's unconscious body and dragged him out the back exit. Sonia crawled toward the door, her fingers scraping against the linoleum, but she was too late. The van tires screeched. They were gone. She was alone in the ruined clinic with a dead doctor and the smell of smoke. Sonia rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the soot. They took him. The dragon had been captured. But they had made a fatal mistake. They left the strategist behind. Sonia sat up. She wiped the blood from her lip. She looked at the dead mercenary Wu Jin had shot. She crawled over to the body and reached into his tactical vest. She pulled out a radio. And a phone. She stood up. Her ribs were screaming, her head was spinning, but her mind was cold, clear ice. Minho, she spoke into the dead man's radio, her voice devoid of fear. Stop shooting. They're gone. Ms. Dave. Minho's voice was breathless. Where's the boss? They took him, Sonia said, walking out of the clinic into the cool night air. To Switzerland. She looked up at the moon. Minho, call the jet. And call the triad. Call the Russians. Call everyone Wu Jin has ever done a favor for. Ms. Dave, what are we doing? Sonia clicked the safety off the mercenary's rifle she had picked up. We are going to war with his mother. The private airstrip in Teterboro was wind-whipped and freezing, a desolate stretch of tarmac under a charcoal sky. But inside the cabin of the Gulfstream G650, the atmosphere was hot enough to melt lead. Minho sat across from Sonia, cleaning a submachine gun with the casual demeanor of someone brushing their teeth. Next to him sat three men who looked like they chewed concrete for breakfast. The leaders of the local factions Wu Jin controlled. They were looking at Sonia like she was a substitute teacher who had walked into a prison riot. With all due respect, Ms. Dave, said a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, Sergei, head of the Russian import procurement. We do not take orders from the accountant. We go in, we burn the place down, we get the boss. Simple. Sonia didn't look up from her tablet. She was rapidly coding a bypass algorithm for a Swiss security grid. If you burn the place down, Sergei, you trigger the automated halon gas suppression system in the medical wing. Wu Jin will suffocate before you even breach the front door. Is that simple enough for you? The cabin went silent. Sergei frowned. Halon. It sucks the oxygen out of the room to stop fires, Sonia explained, finally looking up. Her eyes were dry, hard, and devoid of the terror she felt inside. You go in with fire, you kill him. You go in with guns blazing, the local police, who are on Madam King's payroll, will have the mountains surrounded in 10 minutes. We are not a hammer, gentlemen. We are a scalpel. And who is the surgeon? Minho asked quietly, sliding the bolt of his weapon home. I am, Sonia said. You're just the anesthesia. She stood up, projecting a confidence she didn't feel. She was terrified. She was a data analyst who liked spreadsheets and Pinot Grigio, not international rescue missions involving mercenaries and evil matriarchs. But she kept picturing Wu Jin's face in that clinic. Run. He had sacrificed himself for her. She would burn the world down to get him back. But she would burn it down smartly. We land in Zurich in 4 hours, Sonia commanded. The facility is the Edelweiss Wellness Institute. It sits on a cliff face. Only one road in, one road out. Heavily guarded. But she tapped her screen, bringing up a 3D blueprint. It has a fully automated supply delivery system. Drones and automated trucks bringing in medical supplies every morning at 0400. We hijack a truck? Sergei asked, looking interested. No, Sonia said, a dangerous smile touching her lips. We become the supply. I've already hacked their procurement order. Tomorrow morning, they aren't receiving a shipment of saline and gauze. They're receiving a shipment of specialized medical equipment in large, lead-lined crates. Crates that are large enough to hold 4 very angry men with guns. Minho actually smiled. It was a terrifying sight. And you? I'm going in through the front door, Sonia said. I made an appointment. The Edelweiss Wellness Institute looked less like a hospital and more like a Bond villain's retirement home. It was a sleek, modernist structure of glass and white stone clinging to the side of a snowy Alp. The air was thin and crisp. Sonia stepped out of the rental car. She was dressed in a pristine white wool coat, sunglasses, and a diamond brooch that cost more than her college tuition, courtesy of Wu Jin's safe in the plane. She looked like money. Old money. The kind of money that bought countries. She walked up to the heavy steel gates. A camera buzzed, focusing on her face. "State your business," a voice crackled. "I am Dr. Amara Vance from the Johns Hopkins Neurological Division," Sonia lied smoothly, her voice pitched with impatient authority. "I am here for a consultation regarding patient 404. Madam Kong requested a second opinion on the genetic viability markers. My flight was delayed, and I am in no mood to freeze to death on your doorstep." There was a pause. Sonia held her breath. She had planted the fake email correspondence in their server 3 hours ago during the flight. If they checked the logs, they would see weeks of communication that she had fabricated. One moment, Dr. Vance. The heavy gates groaned open. Sonia walked through. She was in. Inside, the facility was silent and sterile. It smelled of ozone and expensive flowers. An orderly escorted her down long, white corridors. Sonia tapped her earpiece twice, the signal. "Minho, I'm in. The supply trucks should be docking at the South Bay now." "Affirmative," Minho's voice whispered in her ear. "We are in the crates, waiting for the warehouse team to leave." Sonia was led to a massive office overlooking the mountains. Sitting behind a desk that looked like a slab of ice was a woman who could only be Madam Kong. She was tiny, frail-looking, wrapped in a cashmere shawl. But her eyes were exactly like Wu Jin's. Dark, intelligent, ruthless. "Dr. Vance," Madam Kong said, her voice like cracking parchment. "I was not expecting you until this afternoon." "I prefer to be early," Sonia said, taking a seat without being asked. "Time is tissue, as we say." "Where's the donor?" "He is being prepped," Madam Kong said, gesturing to a monitor on her desk. Sonia looked at the screen and her heart stopped. Wu Jin was strapped to a medical bed in a glass-walled room. He was unconscious, hooked up to IVs, his chest rising and falling rhythmically. He looked pale, diminished. "He is a perfect match," Madam Kong said, looking at the screen with the affection one might show a prize-winning pig. "It is a miracle. After all these years, my wayward son finally has a purpose." "A purpose," Sonia repeated, fighting the urge to claw the woman's eyes out. "You mean saving your life?" Madam Kong looked at Sonia, and then she laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. "My life? Oh, you think this is for me?" She pressed a button on her desk. A section of the wall slid back to reveal a sterile isolation room next to the office. Inside, sitting in a wheelchair, looking out at the snow, was a young man. He was skeletal, pale as the snow itself, hooked up to an oxygen tank. But he looked exactly like Wu Jin. "This is Julian," Madam Kong said softly. "My son." Sonia frowned. "Wu Jin is your son." "Wu Jin was the first attempt," Madam Kong said dismissively. "The prototype. He was rough, too emotional, too aggressive, like his father. So I left him behind and tried again. Julian is perfection. Brilliant, obedient, kind. But he was born sick. A genetic defect. I have spent 20 years keeping him alive, waiting for a cure. And then I realized the cure wasn't a medicine. It was a spare part. Before we proceed, smash that subscribe button to know what happens next." The third twist hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Wu Jin wasn't being sacrificed for his mother's greed. He was being harvested for his replacement. The brother he never knew existed. The good son. "You raised one to be a king," Sonia said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage, "and the other to be an organ farm." "I raised one to lead the world," Madam Kong corrected. "And the other to ensure he survived to do it. It is a fair trade. Wu Jin has lived a life of luxury and power. Now he pays the rent." "He's a human being," Sonia snapped, standing up. "Not a spare tire." "He is a gangster," Madam Kong spat. "A thug." "Julian is a visionary. The world needs Julian. It does not need another dragon." "That's where you're wrong," Sonia said. She checked her watch. "The world has enough visionaries. What it needs is someone who knows how to burn down the monsters." "What are you?" Boom. The floor shook. An explosion rocked the south wing of the facility. Alarms began to blare. Red emergency lights bathed the pristine white office in the color of blood. "What did you do?" Madam Kong shrieked, standing up. "I brought the anesthesia," Sonia said calmly. She grabbed the heavy marble bust of Hippocrates from the desk and smashed it into the control panel for the door locks. Sparks flew. The door to the hallway sealed shut, locking the guards out. "Minho." Sonia yelled into her comms. Go loud. Loud is an understatement, Minho replied. We are in the medical wing. Securing the target. In the monitor, Sonia saw the door to Wu Jin's room blow inward. Minho and Sergei stormed in, taking down the medical staff with efficient, non-lethal precision. Taser prongs flew. Orderlies dropped. Minho began ripping the IVs out of Wu Jin's arms. Madame Kong pulled a small pistol from her shawl. She pointed it at Sonia. Her hand was shaking. Stop them, she hissed. Julian needs that marrow. He will die without it. Then maybe he should have had a mother who didn't treat her children like livestock, Sonia said. She didn't back down. She stared down the barrel of the gun. Shoot me. But the door is locked. The system is fried. And my men are taking your spare parts away. Madame Kong hesitated. She looked at Julian in the isolation room, who was watching the chaos with wide, fearful eyes. Then she looked at the monitor, where Minho was carrying Wu Jin out of the room. You are ruining everything, she screamed. I'm restructuring, Sonia corrected. She lunged. Not for the gun, but for the fire alarm pull station on the wall. She yanked it. The sprinklers overhead exploded. Freezing cold water rained down, soaking the office, the expensive rugs, and Madame Kong. The shock made the old woman flinch, and the gun fired wild, shattering a vase. Sonia didn't wait. She grabbed a heavy chair and hurled it through the glass partition separating the office from the hallway. It shattered. She scrambled through the broken glass, ignoring the shards that snagged her coat. Minho, rendezvous at the helipad. She ran through the corridors. The facility was in chaos. Smoke, water, alarms. Mercenaries were running toward the south wing, drawn by the diversion explosion, leaving the path to the roof relatively clear. She burst onto the helipad just as the wind whipped her hair across her face. Minho and Sergei were dragging a semi-conscious Wu Jin toward a waiting helicopter, not one of Madame Kang's, but a sleek black bird that had just touched down. Get him in, Sonia yelled, sprinting across the tarmac. A door to the roof burst open behind her. Madame Kang's head of security, a man the size of a vending machine, stepped out, raising an assault rifle. Sonia didn't have a gun. She had a phone. She hit execute on her screen. The automated supply drones, which she had hacked earlier, suddenly swarmed. For heavy quadcopters, each carrying a 50-pound payload box, dove from the sky like kamikaze birds. They didn't hit the guard. They crashed into the ground in front of him, detonating their lithium batteries in a blinding flash of sparks and smoke. The guard flinched, blinded. It was enough time. Sonia dove into the helicopter. Go, go, go. The pilot yanked the collective. The bird lurched into the sky, banking hard over the cliff edge just as bullets pinged harmlessly off the landing skids. They rose into the gray sky, leaving the Edelweiss Institute shrinking below them, a white tomb for a cruel ambition. Sonia scrambled to the back where Wu Jin lay. Minho was checking his vitals. He is groggy, Minho said. Sedatives. But he is whole. Wu Jin's eyes fluttered open. He looked around, confused, his gaze finally landing on Sonia. She was soaking wet, shivering, her hair a mess, bleeding from a small cut on her cheek. You. He rasped, his voice rough. You came. I told you, Sonia said, tears mixing with the sprinkler water on her face. I'm the surgeon. Wu Jin reached out, his hand trembling. She took it. His grip was weak, but it was there. My mother. She's alive, Sonia said softly. And she has her perfect son. But she doesn't have you. Wu Jin closed his eyes, a single tear escaping. She never did. Rest now, Sonia whispered, kissing his knuckles. We're going home. 3 months later. The charity gala at the Met was the event of the season. The theme was rebirth. Fitting. Sonia stood on the balcony overlooking Central Park, a glass of champagne in her hand. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk that hugged every curve, a stark contrast to the bandages she had worn months ago. You look dangerous, a voice rumbled in her ear. She leaned back against the solid chest of Kong Wu Jin. He looked better than he ever had. The shadows under his eyes were gone. He had gained weight. And the darkness that used to cling to him like a shroud had lifted, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. I am dangerous, Sonia replied, turning in his arms. I'm the COO of Bellux International. I have to be. And the fiancé of the CEO, Wu Jin added, his eyes dancing with amusement. Don't forget that title. I haven't said yes yet, Sonia teased, though the ring on her finger, a rare black diamond, suggested otherwise. You moved your toothbrush into the master bath. That is a legally binding contract in 40 states. He tightened his arms around her. The air was cool, but she felt nothing but warmth. Have you heard from her? Sonia asked quietly. Wu Jin's expression sobered, but the pain was gone. Julian died last week. Natural causes. Or as natural as it gets when you live in a plastic bubble. I'm sorry, Wu Jin. Don't be. I sent flowers. It's done. He looked out at the city lights. She sent a letter. Asking for money. Asking to be let back in. And I returned it. Unopened. He looked down at Sonia, and the love in his eyes was so intense it almost knocked the wind out of her. I don't have space for ghosts, Sonia. My life is full. He kissed her then. It wasn't the desperate kiss of a dying man in a clinic, or the hungry kiss of a man trying to possess her. It was a promise. A seal. A partnership forged in fire and blood and spreadsheets. You know, Sonia whispered against his lips. They're going to say I only married you for the power. Let them talk, Wu Jin smiled, the dragon's grin finally reaching his eyes. They don't know that you're the one who holds the leash. I prefer steering wheel. To us, Wu Jin said, raising her hand to his lips. To falling. And to catching, Sonia finished. They turned back to the party, walking hand in hand into the light, ready to rule the city they had conquered together. Thank you for joining us on this journey with Afro Soul Love Tales. If this story moved you, if you believe that true love is about fighting for your partner no matter the odds, then smash that like button and share this video with a friend who needs a little romance in their life. And don't forget to subscribe, because in our next story, the stakes are even higher. This is Afro Soul Love Tales, signing off.